I cannot sleep. The ocean breathes through the open balcony door, pulling and releasing in a rhythm that should be soothing, but instead feels like a metronome counting the minutes I've spent lying here, staring at the ceiling. The salt air carries something heavier tonight, something that settles in my chest and refuses to let me rest. 3 feet away, Lucas sleeps. His breathing is steady, unhurried, the kind of peaceful sleep I haven't known in weeks, maybe months. His arm has fallen across the narrow space between our beds, fingers relaxed against the cheap hotel carpet. Even in sleep, he takes up more space than he realizes, the way he always has, the way he always will. I turn onto my side, careful not to let the mattress springs betray me, and study his profile in the dim light filtering through the curtains. The moonlight catches the curve of his jaw, the gentle slope of his nose, features I could map from memory, but somehow never tire of seeing. His dark hair falls across his forehead in that careless way that used to make our high school girlfriends jealous. They would ask me what product he used, as if I paid attention to things like that, as if I wasn't already paying attention to everything else about him. The room feels impossibly small. When we checked in 12 hours ago, laughing about the mix-up with the reservations, it seemed fine. Just 2 beds, a narrow walkway between them, a bathroom that barely fits one person. Practical, temporary, the kind of thing best friends do without thinking twice about it. But now, in the thick silence of 3 in the morning, the walls seem to press closer with every breath. I should not have come on this trip. The thought arrives unbidden, settling like a stone in my stomach. I should have made up an excuse, claimed I had to work extra shifts at the bookstore, told them my summer classes required more attention. Anything that would have kept me 200 miles away from this moment, from this room, from the growing awareness that I am losing myself in the proximity of someone who will never feel the same weight when he looks at me. We have been best friends for 4 years. 4 years of easy companionship, of inside jokes that make no sense to anyone else, of late-night phone calls that stretch until dawn. For years of me telling myself that the flutter in my chest when he laughs is just appreciation for good humor, that the way I memorize his expressions is just what close friends do, that the reason I know exactly how he likes his coffee, which songs make him nostalgic, and what his laugh sounds like when he thinks no one is listening is simply the natural result of spending so much time together. But lying here now, listening to the steady in and out of his breathing, I cannot pretend anymore. Cannot tell myself that the warmth spreading through my rib cage is anything other than what it is. Cannot ignore the way my pulse quickens when his knee brushes mine under restaurant tables, or how I find excuses to stay close when we walk together, or why I agreed so quickly when the others announced there weren't enough rooms to go around. He stirred 20 minutes ago, mumbling something I couldn't make out, and for a heartbeat I thought he might wake up. Thought I might have to explain why I was awake, why I was watching him, why the air in this room feels too thin to breathe properly. But he settled back into sleep, one arm curving under his pillow, and I was left alone with the realization that I wanted him to wake up, wanted him to see me here, wrestling with something I have no name for. Earlier tonight, before we collapsed into our respective beds, still sandy from the beach, still slightly sunburned and loose with laughter, he asked me if I was okay. Just that simple question, but delivered with the kind of attention that makes you feel like you're the only person in the world. His eyes, brown like coffee grounds, held mine for longer than necessary as he waited for my answer. I told him I was fine, just tired from the drive, from the sun, from too much of everything that comes with vacation. He nodded, accepting the lie with the same easy trust he has always given me, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, exactly, but fissure. A hairline fracture that I know will only widen the longer I try to ignore it. The truth is that I have not been fine for months. Maybe longer. The truth is that somewhere between graduation and now, between the last normal summer and this moment, everything changed. Or maybe nothing changed at all. And I'm only now admitting to myself what has always been there, waiting patiently in the spaces between our conversations, in the silences that feel more meaningful than words. I know things about Luca that his other friends do not know. I know that he reads the last chapter of books first because he cannot stand the suspense. I know that he hates the sound of styrofoam, but will never tell anyone because he thinks it makes him seem childish. I know that when he is nervous, really nervous, he runs his thumb along his bottom lip in a gesture so subtle most people miss it entirely. But I also know things that keep me awake at night, things that feel too heavy to carry alone. I know that when he smiles at me across a crowded room, everything else fades to background noise. I know that the sound of his voice saying my name can anchor me to moments I want to live in forever. I know that when he touches my shoulder, even casually, even briefly, my skin remembers it for hours afterward. These are not the things best friends are supposed to know about each other. These are not the thoughts that should arise from years of easy friendship. These are something else entirely, something that has been growing in the quiet spaces of my life, like a secret garden I never planted but cannot stop tending. The waves outside seem louder now, or maybe I'm just more aware of them. They rush forward and pull back, rush forward and pull back, an endless cycle of approach and retreat that feels almost like breathing. Like the room itself is alive, expanding and contracting around us while we sleep and wake and pretend that sharing this space means nothing more than convenience. Tomorrow we will wake up and join the others for breakfast. We will laugh about something ridiculous, probably make fun of whichever of our friends snored the loudest or stole all the blankets. We will spend the day at the beach, and I will watch Luca emerge from the water with salt dark hair and sunlight on his shoulders, and I will tell myself I am just appreciating the way everyone looks happy and carefree. We will eat dinner together around the weathered table on the deck, and when night falls we will return to this room, to these two narrow beds, and I will lie here again, listening to him breathe and wondering when exactly I fell so completely for someone who sees me only as the friend I have always been. But for now, in this suspended moment between one day and the next, I allow myself the luxury of honesty. I allow myself to admit that I came on this trip not for the sun or the ocean or the chance to reconnect with old friends. I came because Luca would be here, because the thought of a week in his company felt like both the best and worst idea I had ever had. His hand twitches slightly against the carpet, fingers flexing in some dream I will never know about. For a wild moment, I consider reaching out, letting my fingertips brush against his knuckles, just to see what would happen, just to know if he would wake up, if he would pull away, if he would look at me with confusion or understanding or something else entirely. But I do not move, cannot move, because some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. Some truths, once spoken, change everything that comes after. And I am not ready for everything to change. Even though lying here in the dark, I realize that everything already has. The morning comes eventually, as mornings always do, with pale light filtering through curtains that do nothing to block the sound of our friends already awake in the kitchen below. I have maybe slept 2 hours, drifting in and out of consciousness, while Luca remained peacefully unaware beside me. When he finally stirs, stretching with that unconscious grace he has always possessed, I pretend to be asleep until he disappears into the bathroom. I am 22 years old, and I feel ancient. Old in the way that comes from carrying secrets that grow heavier with each passing day, from living a life that feels perpetually suspended between what is and what might be. Most days, I move through the world like someone waiting for permission to begin living, as if real life is something that happens to other people while I observe from the margins. The university feels temporary, even though I am halfway through my second year. Literature and philosophy courses that I chose because they sounded meaningful, but mostly leave me more confused about who I am supposed to become. My professors speak about finding your voice, about the importance of authentic expression, and I sit in lecture halls wondering if authenticity is even possible when you spend most of your energy hiding the most honest parts of yourself. I work 20 hours a week at Riverside Books, a cramped independent bookstore near campus where the owner, Margaret, lets me organize the poetry section however I want and never asks why I spend my breaks reading the same collections over and over. She hired me because I can recommend books to customers based on the vaguest descriptions of what they're looking for, some instinct for matching people with the words they need. What I cannot do is find the words I need for myself. My apartment is a study in impermanence. Two roommates who are perfectly pleasant, but feel more like polite strangers I happen to share kitchen space with. Furniture that came with a lease, books stacked everywhere because I have never bothered to buy proper shelves, clothes draped over chairs because committing to hanging them up feels like admitting I plan to stay. Everything about my living situation suggests someone who has not yet decided what kind of person they want to be. Luca, on the other hand, has always moved through the world with a certainty I envy. Even in high school, when the rest of us were flailing through the usual adolescent confusion, he seemed to know exactly who he was. Not in an arrogant way, never that, but with a quiet confidence that drew people to him like gravity. Teachers loved him, other students sought his approval, and somehow he managed it all without ever making anyone feel diminished in comparison. He is studying business now, though he talks about it the way other people discuss the weather, something practical and necessary, but not particularly exciting. His real passion is photography, something he discovered during his summer abroad program that I spent missing him with an intensity that should have been my first clue about the nature of my feelings. He came back with hundreds of images of narrow European streets and weathered faces, light captured in ways that made ordinary moments look sacred. When he talks about his photographs, his whole demeanor changes. The easy confidence remains, but it deepens into something more focused, more alive. He will spend an entire evening explaining the difference between natural and artificial lighting, gesturing with his hands to show how shadows fall, his eyes bright with the kind of enthusiasm that makes you want to care about whatever he cares about just to keep him talking. This beach house vacation was Emma's idea, though Luca was the one who convinced the rest of us to commit. Emma from our high school friend group, now studying abroad in Spain and home for exactly 3 weeks before she leaves again. She wanted to gather everyone together to recreate something from the summers when we were 17 and 18 and thought friendship was simple, permanent, guaranteed. The house itself sits about 50 yards from the water, weathered shingles, and a wraparound porch that sags slightly on one side. Inside, everything is mismatched and slightly shabby in the way of rental properties that have hosted thousands of temporary guests. The living room furniture has that broken-in quality of having been sat on by countless strangers, and the kitchen contains an odd assortment of dishes and cookware that no one ever bothers to replace, because no one stays long enough to care. But there is something appealing about the impermanence of it all, the way vacation houses exist outside normal time and normal rules. The sand that finds its way inside despite our best efforts, the salt air that makes everything feel slightly damp, the way we fall into routines that would never work in real life, but feel natural here. Late breakfasts that stretch into early afternoons, impromptu beach walks that turn into hours of sitting on driftwood, talking about nothing important, dinners that somehow expand to fill entire evenings. Our group has scattered across different universities, different states, different versions of who we thought we wanted to become. Jake is pre-med now, serious in a way that feels both admirable and slightly exhausting. Emma has become worldly in that particular way of people who have lived in foreign countries, dropping casual references to places and experiences the rest of us can only imagine. Sarah is engaged to someone she met her first week of college, planning a life that seems impossibly adult and settled. And then there is Luca and me, still orbiting each other the way we have for years, still falling into the same easy patterns that everyone else assumes mean nothing more than long-standing friendship. When the others talk about their romantic relationships, their dating disasters and future plans, Luca and I listen with the kind of polite interest you show when people discuss experiences that feel remote from your own life. What they do not see is the way my attention always drifts back to him, even in the middle of other conversations. The way I have memorized the sound of his laugh, the gesture he makes when he is thinking hard about something, the way his voice changes when he is tired. They do not notice that I can track his mood across a crowded room, that I know when he is genuinely amused versus just being polite, that I have developed an entire internal vocabulary for reading the subtle shifts in his expression. Last night, When we realized the sleeping arrangements would require sharing rooms, everyone else treated it as a minor logistical problem. Of course, Nathaniel and Luca would share, they said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Best friends since high school, comfortable with each other, no big deal. I agreed immediately, perhaps too quickly, while something complicated unfolded in my chest. Relief and terror in equal measure. The simultaneous desire to be close to him and the fear of what that closeness might reveal about me. About us. Now, listening to him hum something under his breath as he gets dressed, I wonder if this week will finally force me to confront what I have been avoiding for so long. Or if I will spend 7 days perfecting the art of pretending that sharing this small space with him affects me no differently than rooming with any other friend. The water runs in the bathroom, and I know I have maybe 5 more minutes before I need to get up, put on the same easy smile I have worn around him for years, and pretend that nothing has changed. Even though everything has. It happens so casually that I almost miss the significance of it. We are standing in the living room after dinner, full of takeout Chinese food and slightly dizzy from the bottle of wine Emma insisted we share to celebrate our first night. The conversation has turned to logistics, to who sleeps where, and I watch it unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a scene in a movie. Sarah claims the single room upstairs because, she says with a laugh, she needs space to spread out all her skincare products. Emma and Jake will take the room with twin beds because they have known each other longest, and Jake, according to Emma, sleeps like the dead and will not mind her habit of reading with the light on until 3 in the morning, which leaves the remaining room for Luca and me. The announcement comes from Emma, delivered with the same practical tone she might use to discuss dinner plans or beach schedules. Of course you two will room together, she says, gesturing between us with her wine glass. You have been attached at the hip since high school anyway. Everyone laughs, the kind of comfortable laughter that comes from years of shared history and running jokes. Luca grins and shrugs, tossing me a pillow from the couch as if to seal the arrangement. No big deal, his expression says. Just like old times. I catch the pillow reflexively and nod, hoping my smile looks as relaxed as his. Sure, I say, no problem at all. The words feel strange in my mouth, too light for the weight of what this decision means to me. No one else notices the pause before I speak, the way I have to clear my throat slightly to get the words out. But even as I agree, even as the conversation moves on to other topics, I feel something shift inside my chest. A door opening that I have been keeping carefully locked, or perhaps just the acknowledgement that the door was never really closed to begin with. We have shared sleeping spaces before, of course. During high school sleepovers when we were younger, and these things felt simpler, when friendship was uncomplicated and touch was casual, and I did not spend every interaction analyzing the space between us. There was the camping trip junior year, when we ended up in the same tent, and the night after graduation, when we stayed up until dawn in my bedroom talking about college and the future and fell asleep on top of the covers still fully dressed. But those moments existed in a different version of our friendship before I understood what the flutter in my stomach meant when he laughed at my jokes, before I started noticing the way his eyes crinkle slightly when he smiles, before I began memorizing details about him that felt too intimate for casual friendship. Now, as we carry our bags upstairs and I get my first real look at the room we will share for the next 6 nights, everything feels charged with potential significance. 2 double beds, separated by perhaps 3 feet of space, a window that faces the ocean, a small dresser that we will have to negotiate sharing. It is perfectly ordinary and somehow terrifying in its ordinariness. Luca drops his duffel bag on the bed closest to the window and immediately moves to open the balcony door, letting in the sound of waves and the salt-heavy evening air. He has always been comfortable claiming space this way, not aggressive or inconsiderate, just naturally at ease in whatever environment he finds himself in. It is one of the things I've always admired about him, and one of the things that makes being around him both comfortable and slightly overwhelming. I take the other bed, grateful for the few feet of distance, even as part of me wishes we were closer. The space between us feels precisely calibrated, close enough for conversation, but far enough to maintain the illusion of boundaries. As we unpack, we fall into the easy rhythm we have perfected over years of friendship. He tells me about the book he brought, a photography collection by some artist whose name I immediately forget because I'm too focused on the way he gestures with his hands when he talks. I show him a novel I packed, though I know already that I will spend more time watching him read than focusing on my own pages. The first night passes in a blur of laughter from the other rooms, the sound of someone showering, footsteps in the hallway as people brush their teeth and settle into sleep. Luca and I lie in our respective beds, talking in the darkness about nothing important, the kind of meandering conversation that feels like a luxury when you're used to structured time together. He tells me about a photograph he wants to take of the sunrise from a beach, how the light at that hour is supposed to be perfect for the kind of moody landscape shots he has been practicing. I listen to his voice in the darkness and try to memorize the sound of it, try to capture the way he gets excited about technical details that would bore most people. When he finally falls asleep, I remain awake for what feels like hours, hyper-aware of every sound he makes, every shift in the mattress across the narrow space between us. This is what I wanted, I realize. This proximity, this intimacy, this glimpse into the unguarded version of himself that exists only in private moments. But lying there in the darkness, listening to his breathing settle into the steady rhythm of sleep, I also understand for the first time how dangerous this week might be. How spending this much time in close quarters with someone you have been carefully not falling in love with might force you to confront feelings you have been pretending do not exist. The ocean outside our window continues its endless conversation with the shore, waves advancing and retreating in a pattern that feels both soothing and ominous, like a countdown to something inevitable, something I am not sure I am ready for, but no longer certain I can avoid. Tomorrow we will wake up and join the others for breakfast and pretend this arrangement is as casual and uncomplicated as everyone believes it to be. We will spend the day at the beach, and I will watch him emerge from the water with his hair dark and his skin salt-slicked, and I will tell myself that what I feel is just the normal appreciation one friend has for another. But tonight, in this small room that smells like ocean air and possibility, I allow myself to acknowledge the truth that has been growing quietly in the spaces between our conversations. This week will change something between us, whether I want it to or not. The only question is whether I will be brave enough to let it happen, or if I will spend the next 6 days perfecting the art of pretending my heart does not race every time he says my name in the darkness. The transformation begins slowly, like watching the tide change. Over the next 3 days, I become a student of proximity, an unwilling expert in the geography of attraction. Every casual touch feels amplified, every shared glance carries weight I am not sure how to interpret, and I find myself cataloging moments that probably mean nothing to him but feel seismic to me. It starts with small things. The way he brushes past me in the narrow kitchen while reaching for coffee mugs, his shoulder grazing mine for just a second longer than necessary. The way he throws his arm around me when we're walking back from the beach, sand still clinging to our skin, his touch warm and casual and completely devastating. The way our knees bump under the weathered table on the deck during meals, a point of contact so brief and ordinary that acknowledging it would seem ridiculous, but that I feel for hours afterward like a burn. I have always been aware of Luca in rooms, the way some people are naturally drawn to sources of warmth or light. But now that awareness has sharpened into something almost painful, I know, without looking when he enters a space, can track his movement across the beach house by the sound of his footsteps, find myself listening for his laugh in conversations I am not part of just to know where he is. On Tuesday morning, I watch him emerge from the ocean after an early swim, water streaming from his dark hair, and I have to excuse myself to walk alone down the beach until I can breathe normally again. He calls after me, asking if I want company, and I wave him off with some excuse about needing to clear my head, which is not entirely untrue, though the thing I need to clear from my head is the image of him standing waist-deep in the waves, backlit by morning sun like something from one of his photography collections. Our old rhythm is still there, the comfortable ease that has defined our friendship for years. We fall into our familiar patterns of inside jokes and shared references, moments when we seem to communicate in a language only we understand. But underneath that familiar current runs something new, something that makes me hyper-aware of the space between us when we sit together on the couch, of the way he looks at me sometimes when he thinks I'm not paying attention. Wednesday evening, after the others have gone to bed, we sit on the small balcony outside our room watching the moon make a silver path across the water. Luca is talking about the future in that abstract way people do when they are feeling philosophical, wondering aloud about cities and careers and whether any of us will still be close in 5 years. His voice carries a note of melancholy that I recognize, the same undertone that creeps in whenever he talks about time passing or things changing. I want to tell him that some things do not change, that whatever this is between us has been constant for so long that I can barely remember what it felt like before. But instead I listen, adding small comments that keep him talking, because his voice in the darkness feels like something I could listen to forever. When he mentions being afraid of losing these moments, losing this version of ourselves, I feel something crack open in my chest. The urge to reach for him, to close the distance between our chairs, to tell him that he will never lose me no matter what else changes, is so strong that I have to grip the arms of my chair to keep my hands still. The silence that follows feels heavy with things unsaid. I can hear him breathing beside me, can sense the way he has turned slightly in his chair to look at me, but I keep my eyes fixed on the horizon because I'm afraid of what he might see in my face if I meet his gaze. Thursday brings a group trip to town, wandering through shops and galleries while Sarah searches for souvenirs and Jay complains about tourist prices. Luca gravitates toward a small photography exhibit in the window of a local gallery, studying the black and white landscapes with a focused attention he reserved for things that truly interest him. I find myself studying him instead of the photographs, watching the way his eyes move across the compositions, the slight frown of concentration that appears when he is really looking at something. The gallery owner, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and paint-stained fingers, notices his interest and strikes up a conversation about aperture and light. I listen to them discuss technical concepts I only half understand, but I'm fascinated by the way Luca becomes more animated, more himself when talking about something he loves. His whole body language changes, becomes more open and expressive, and I realize I'm witnessing the version of him that exists when he forgets to be careful about what he reveals. On the walk back to the beach house, he shows me the business card the gallery owner gave him, tells me she invited him to submit some of his work for their next local artist showcase. His excitement is infectious, and for a moment, our usual dynamic reasserts itself. I am simply happy for my friend, proud of his talent, grateful to witness this moment of possibility in his life. But then he looks at me, really looks at me, and says, "Thank you for listening back there, for caring about this stuff, even though you probably think it is boring." And something in his tone, in the way he holds my gaze just a beat longer than usual, makes my stomach flip in a way that has nothing to do with friendship and everything to do with the growing certainty that I am in love with him. That night, lying in our respective beds with the balcony door open and the sound of waves providing its constant soundtrack, I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something irreversible. The easy familiarity is still there, but underneath it runs this current of awareness that grows stronger every day. Every casual touch, every shared glance, every moment when we exist alone together in this small space feels charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. I listen to his breathing slow as he drifts towards sleep and wonder how much longer I can pretend that sharing this room with him is just a matter of convenience. Wonder if he has noticed the way I watch him when he thinks I'm not looking, if he can sense the shift in the air between us, if he lies awake, sometimes wondering about the same impossible things that keep me staring at the ceiling until dawn. The ocean outside continues its endless conversation with the shore, and I realize that I am running out of time to decide what I want this week to mean. Whether I will spend the remaining days hiding behind the safety of friendship, or whether I will find the courage to acknowledge what has been growing in the silence between us all along. It happens on Thursday night, After a day that stretched long and golden like summer days do, when you're not quite ready for them to end. We had spent the afternoon on the beach, all of us together for once instead of scattered in smaller groups, playing volleyball badly and laughing at Jake's increasingly elaborate attempts to impress Sarah despite her engagement ring catching the sunlight every time she moved her hands. Luca took photographs of everything. The makeshift volleyball net strung between two pieces of driftwood, Emma buried up to her neck in sand while Sarah carefully shaped a mermaid tail around her legs, the way the late afternoon light turned the waves amber and gold. I found myself in several of his shots, captured mid-laugh or looking out at the horizon, and each time a camera clicked, I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the lens. Later, as the sun dropped toward the water and the air began to cool, we built a fire in the metal ring someone had dug into the sand years ago. Emma produced marshmallows from somewhere, and we sat in a loose circle watching the flames dance while Sarah told increasingly elaborate ghost stories that made no one jump but kept us all entertained. By the time we trudged back to the house, sandy and slightly sunburned and tired in that particular way that comes from spending an entire day outdoors, it was past 11. The others disappeared to their respective rooms with mumbled goodnights and promises to clean up the beach gear tomorrow. Luca and I climbed the stairs together, our footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway. In our room, the routine we have developed over the past few days unfolds automatically. He claims the bathroom first while I organize tomorrow's clothes. Then we switch places while he sets up his camera equipment for the sunrise shots he has been planning. By the time I emerge from brushing my teeth, he is already in bed, scrolling through the photographs from today on the camera's small screen. "Look at this one," he says, and there is something different in his voice. Softer, maybe, or more thoughtful. He holds the camera toward me, and I cross the small space between our beds to see what he wants to show me. It is a photograph of me from this afternoon, taken when I was not aware of being watched. I am sitting on a piece of driftwood, looking out at the water, and something about the angle of the light has turned the moment into something that looks almost cinematic. Dreamy and contemplative in a way that makes me barely recognize myself. I did not realize you took this, I say, though what I really mean is that I did not realize this is how I look when I think no one is watching. There's something vulnerable about the image, something unguarded, that makes me feel seen in a way that is both thrilling and terrifying. "You were so still," he says, "like you were thinking about something important." I wanted to capture that expression. His voice has dropped to barely above a whisper, though there is no one else around over here. I am still leaning over his bed to see the camera screen, close enough to smell the lingering salt in his hair, close enough to notice the way his breathing has changed. "What were you thinking about?" he asks, and when I look up from the camera, our faces are closer than they have ever been outside of accidental moments. Close enough that I can see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough that I feel his breath against my skin. For a moment, neither of us moves. The camera sits forgotten between us while something shifts in the air, some invisible barrier giving way to a truth that has been building for days. For months. For years. Maybe I'm only now recognizing it for what it is. I want to say, I was thinking about you, about this week, about how being this close to you feels like standing at the edge of a cliff and wanting to jump. But the words feel too large, too dangerous, too likely to change everything that comes after. Instead, I whisper something else, something safer but still true. "Do you remember that night senior year, when we stayed up until dawn talking about whether we would still be friends after college?" He nods, his eyes never leaving mine. "We were so worried about growing apart," he says, "about becoming different people." I almost laugh at the irony of it. We have not grown apart. If anything, we have grown closer, though not in any way either of us could have predicted back then. We have become different people, but the change has been internal, invisible, a gradual shift in the way I understand what it means to love someone. "I was terrified that night," I tell him, "not of losing you as a friend, but of never telling you how much you meant to me." His hand finds mine somewhere in the space between our beds, fingers intertwining with a naturalness that feels both shocking and inevitable. Neither of us planned this moment, but now that we are here, it feels like the only possible destination we could have arrived at. The touch is electric and gentle at the same time, his thumb tracing small circles across my knuckles while we continue to look at each other in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Everything about this moment feels suspended, existing outside of normal time, as if we have found ourselves in a pocket of possibility that might disappear if either of us moves too quickly. "You mean everything to me," he says quietly, and though the words could be interpreted as friendship, something in his tone suggests otherwise. Something in the way he is looking at me, in the careful way he holds my hand like it is something precious he is afraid of breaking. I know I should pull away, should laugh, and make some joke that returns us to safer ground. Should remind us both that we are best friends and nothing more. That this moment is just the result of too much sun and the strange intimacy that comes from sharing small spaces with someone for too long. But I do not pull away. Instead, I let my fingers tighten around his, let myself fall into the warmth of his gaze, let myself acknowledge for the first time that maybe, possibly, I'm not the only one who has been pretending that friendship is enough. The ocean outside our window continues its endless rhythm, but inside this small room, time feels perfectly still. We lie there in the darkness, hands joined across the narrow space between our beds, neither of us speaking because some things are too fragile for words, neither of us moving because this moment feels too precious to risk breaking. But something has shifted between us, something fundamental and irreversible. The careful distance we have maintained, the pretense that this week means nothing more than friends spending time together, has given way to an honesty that changes everything. Tomorrow we will have to decide what this means, what we want it to mean. But tonight in the darkness, it is enough to hold his hand and know that I am not alone in this feeling that has been growing between us all along. I lie awake for hours after that moment, our hands still loosely connected across the space between beds, listening to the sound of Luca's breathing as it gradually slows into sleep. My pulse feels too loud in the quiet room, as if my heart might give away everything I am thinking, everything I am feeling, everything I'm afraid to want. His thumb had traced those small circles across my knuckles for what felt like an eternity before sleep finally claimed him, his fingers relaxing but never quite letting go. Now, in the deep quiet of 3 in the morning, I study his face in the dim light and try to understand what just happened between us. Try to parse the difference between the touch of friendship and something else entirely. The rational part of my mind, the part that has spent years protecting this relationship by keeping it safely defined, insists that I am reading too much into a simple gesture. Friends hold hands sometimes. Friends comfort each other. Friends share moments of vulnerability without it meaning anything beyond the bonds of long history and mutual affection. But there was something in his voice when he said I meant everything to him, something in the way he looked at me while our fingers intertwined that felt like more than friendship, something that made the air between us feel charged with possibility and terrifying with the potential for everything to change. I know I could pull my hand away now. I could pretend to shift in my sleep, could create the physical distance that might allow us both to wake up tomorrow and dismiss this moment as nothing more than late-night sentimentality. I could protect us both from having to confront what it might mean if this touch, this connection, is the beginning of something we cannot take back. But I do not pull away. I cannot, because holding his hand feels like the most honest thing I have done in months, maybe years. Like finally admitting to myself that the careful distance I have maintained has been a kind of lie, a way of protecting us both from a truth that has been growing in the silence between conversations, in the spaces where our friendship has always felt like something more. The choice I am facing feels impossibly large. To tighten my fingers around his, to acknowledge this connection for what it really is, would be to step across a line that cannot be uncrossed. To risk everything we have built together over 4 years of friendship. To potentially lose him entirely if I have misread this moment. If what feels like mutual recognition is actually just my own wishful thinking projected onto his kindness. But to let go, to retreat back into the safety of pretending this means nothing, feels like a different kind of loss. Like choosing fear over truth, like spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I had been brave enough to be honest about what I want. I think about all the conversations we have had about the future, about growing up and growing apart, and the fear of losing the connections that matter most. I think about the way he talked about being afraid of change, afraid of losing these moments, and wonder if part of what he was really saying was that he is afraid of losing this, whatever this is between us. His hand shifts slightly in sleep, fingers tightening around mine for just a moment, and I feel my breath catch. Even unconscious, even deep in whatever dreams occupy his mind, some part of him is choosing to hold on. Some part of him is refusing to let go. The morning will come soon, bringing with it the need to face our friends over breakfast, to pretend that nothing has changed, to navigate the careful choreography of acting normal while everything inside me feels rearranged. Emma will make her terrible coffee, and Jake will complain about the lumpy couch, and Sarah will suggest another beach day, and we will all fall into our familiar roles as if this night never happened. But something has happened, something that cannot be undone, even if we never speak of it directly. The knowledge of this touch, this moment of connection, will exist between us now like a secret we share, a truth that changes the color of every interaction that comes after. I make my choice without fully realizing I am making it. My fingers tighten around his, not enough to wake him, but enough to anchor this moment, to claim it as real and meaningful and worth whatever comes next. Enough to admit, finally and completely, that I want this, that I want him, that I'm tired of pretending friendship is enough when what I feel goes so much deeper than anything friendship can contain. The decision settles into my chest like something that has been waiting for me to acknowledge it. Like something that was always going to happen, eventually, when I finally became brave enough to stop hiding from my own heart. There will be consequences to this choice. There will be conversations we cannot avoid, questions that will need answers, a relationship that will have to be redefined or possibly ended entirely. There will be the risk of losing not just him, but our entire friend group, the comfortable dynamic we have all built our college lives around. But lying here in the darkness, our hands joined across the narrow space between beds, I finally understand that some risks are worth taking, that some truths are too important to keep hidden, even when revealing them might change everything you thought you knew about yourself and the person lying 3 feet away from you. Outside our window, the ocean continues its endless conversation with the shore, waves advancing and retreating in patterns that seem both random and inevitable. Like the rhythm of breathing, like the beat of a heart, like the slow acknowledgement of feelings that have been building for longer than I have been willing to admit. Tomorrow will bring light and the need for decisions, for words that will either bridge the gap between us or make it unbridgeable. But tonight, in this suspended moment between one version of our friendship and whatever comes next, it is enough to hold his hand and know that I'm finally being honest about what I want. The fear remains, sharp and present in my chest. But underneath it, growing stronger with each passing minute, is something that feels like hope. Like the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I am not alone in wanting something more than what we have always been. The morning arrives with the kind of gentle light that photographers pray for, filtering through our curtains in soft gold ribbons that turn everything in the room luminous and dreamlike. I wake before Luca, as I have every morning this week, but today feels different. Today I wake with our fingers still intertwined between the beds, my hands slightly stiff from sleeping in an awkward position, but unwilling to move and break whatever spell has carried us through the night. I lie perfectly still, watching him sleep in the early light, memorizing the peaceful expression on his face, the way his dark hair falls across his forehead, the steady rise and fall of his chest. In sleep, he looks younger somehow, more vulnerable, and I am struck by how much I love him in this unguarded moment. Not just the version of him that exists in our friendship, but all of him. The parts he shows the world, and the parts he keeps hidden, the confidence and the uncertainty, the easy laughter and the quiet thoughtfulness that emerges when he thinks no one is paying attention. He stirs slowly, the way he always does, coming back to consciousness gradually rather than all at once. His eyes open and find mine immediately, as if some part of him knew I was watching. And for a moment, we simply look at each other across the narrow space between our beds. Neither of us speaks. Neither of us moves to break the connection of our joined hands. In the growing light, I can see something in his expression that I have never seen before, or perhaps have seen but never allowed myself to recognize. A softness, a question, a kind of vulnerable hope that makes my chest tighten with the possibility that maybe this feeling, this want, is not entirely one-sided. "Good morning," he says finally, his voice rough with sleep, and even those simple words carry a weight that feels significant, as if he too understands that this morning is different from all the mornings that came before it. "Good morning," I whisper back, and somehow in that exchange, in the way we are looking at each other, something is acknowledged without being spoken. Some understanding passes between us that this moment, this connection, means something neither of us is quite ready to name, but both of us are willing to honor. He shifts slightly, turning more fully toward me, and our hands adjust naturally to accommodate the movement. His thumb traces across my knuckles the way it did last night, a gesture so gentle and deliberate that it feels like a question and an answer all at once. I should be terrified. Part of me is terrified. But lying here in the pale morning light, our hands joined and our eyes holding each other's gaze, I feel something else too. A sense of rightness, of inevitability, as if we have been moving toward this moment for years without realizing it. As if all the careful friendship, all the unspoken feelings, all the moments when I wondered if I was imagining the connection between us, have led to this quiet recognition of what has always been true. We cannot stay here forever. Already I can hear movement from the other rooms, the sound of someone starting coffee in the kitchen below, the distant murmur of voices as our friends begin their day. Soon we will have to let go of each other's hands, get dressed, go downstairs and pretend that nothing has changed. We will eat breakfast and make plans for our last day at the beach and pack our bags, because tomorrow we return to our separate lives, our separate cities, our separate attempts to figure out who we are supposed to become. But something has shifted forever, something that cannot be taken back or explained away or dismissed as vacation sentimentality. Lying here now, I know that when we return home, we will not be able to go back to the way things were. We will have to find a new way to be friends, or we will have to find the courage to be something more than friends, or we will have to learn to live with the knowledge that we want things we cannot have. The prospect should frighten me more than it does. Instead, looking at him in the morning light, I feel a strange sense of peace, as if acknowledging this feeling, this truth, has lifted a weight I did not realize I was carrying. As if being honest, finally and completely honest, is worth whatever uncertainty comes next. Luca releases my hand gently, not pulling away, but simply giving me the choice to move first. His eyes never leave mine as I slowly bring my hand back to my own bed, my fingers still tingling from his touch. The physical distance between us returns, but the emotional connection remains, hanging in the air between us like something visible and precious. I do not know what will happen when we leave this room, when we rejoin our friends, when we drive back to our respective universities and try to return to our normal lives. I do not know if we will talk about what happened here, if we will find the words to name what we have discovered, if we will have the courage to pursue what this might become. But I know that I will never forget the weight of his hand in mine, the way he looked at me in the darkness and in the morning light, the feeling of finally being honest about what I want. I know that whatever comes next, this week has changed me in ways I'm only beginning to understand. I slip out of bed quietly and move to the balcony, drawn by the sound of waves and the need for air that does not taste like possibility and fear in equal measure. Behind me, I hear Luca moving around the room, getting dressed, preparing to face the day and our friends, and the careful choreography of pretending everything is normal. The ocean stretches endlessly before me, constant and ever-changing, and I think about how some things remain the same while everything else transforms around them. How the waves will continue their endless conversation with the shore long after we pack our bags and leave this place, long after we figure out what this week has meant and what it will become. When Luca joins me on the balcony a few minutes later, fully dressed and holding 2 cups of coffee, he does not stand as close as he might have yesterday. But when he hands me my cup and our fingers brush briefly, I feel the same electric recognition that I felt in the darkness. The same acknowledgement that something has changed between us, something that cannot be unchanged. We drink our coffee in comfortable silence, watching the morning light dance across the water, and I realize that I'm no longer afraid of what comes next. Whatever it is, whatever we decide, it will be honest in a way that our friendship has never been before. And maybe, for now, that is enough.